everybody. Good morning. I'm Julia Alberg-Burbank, and I am your worship associate today, and I want to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. You just take a moment to make sure your cell phones are silenced as we get ready to enjoy this beautiful Sunday together. As we begin today's service, we acknowledge that we gather on the unceded lands of the Agua Caliente Band of the Kuya people, and we commit to grow in our understanding and relationship with this land and with the people who inhabited it and nurtured it before our arrival. In this congregation, we strive to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You are welcome, no matter your sexual orientation or gender identity, your age or your size, whether you're rich or poor. We welcome people of all races, religions, and cultures. We welcome you wherever you come from and whoever you love. We welcome all those who will learn and grow with us as we commit together to embrace the rich and beautiful diversity of the world. Our goal here is to build a community centered in justice, in compassion, and in love. We are glad you're with us today, whether you are here in the sanctuary or online. Your presence is a blessing. Just take a moment of personal privilege to recognize Joni being back with us today. We are so thankful. Now, if you are a newcomer or a visitor, and you're here for the first time and are comfortable, you're invited to stand or raise your hand, and an usher will come to you with a microphone. Right now, please just share your name and where you're from, and after the service, we'd like to get to know you better at coffee hour. Anybody? Wow. Okay. Good morning, everybody. And now we will ring the Tibetan bowl and listen to our music for centering.
We'll try that again. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces, and there see communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. And so we gather to worship together today. We'll begin this gathering by singing together. I'm going to invite you to remain seated as we sing together, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. We'll sing it through 3 times.
Wonder
Please join me in the words on the screen as Reverend Ian lights our chalice. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. Please join me as Katie Fass lights our biopod candle. We light these candles in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as we journey together toward spiritual wholeness. May we, as a beloved community, work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all prevail. And now we will hear from the choir, a wonderful selection.
We make it happen, 'cause we can see it. Here's to the one.
And now we have a reading from the Sufi thinker Al-Ghazali. O disciple, be neither destitute of good deeds nor devoid of spiritual states, for you can be sure that mere knowledge will not help. It is as though a man in the desert had 10 Indian swords and other weapons besides, the man being brave and a warrior, and a huge, terrifying lion attacked him. What is your opinion? Will the weapons repel this danger of his from him without their being used and being wielded? It is obvious they will not repel unless it is drawn and wielded. Likewise, if a man studied 100,000 intellectual issues and understood them, but did not act on the strength of them, they would not be of use to him except by taking action. Or it is though a man had a temperature and jaundice, which is treated by oxymel and barley infusion, no recovery will take place except by using them. Even if you studied for 100 years and collected 1,000 books, you would not be eligible for the mercy of God the Exalted, except through action. This is a reading from a more modern day thinker, James Luther Adams. The voluntary association, at its best, offers an institutional framework within which the give and take of discussion may be promoted. An institutional framework within which a consensus may be brought under criticism and be subjected to change. It offers a means for bringing a variety of perspectives into play. It offers the means of breaking through old social structures in order to meet new needs. It is a means of dispersing power in the sense that power is the capacity to participate in making social decisions. It is the training ground of the skills that are required for viable social existence in a democracy. In short, the voluntary association is a means for the institutionalizing of gradual revolution.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for your ongoing generosity for the support of this community, which gives us all so much, and to which we all bring, so much. Before we move into Joys and Sorrows, I want to let you know a little bit about what the choir sang for us today. Thank you, choir. And wonderful to have such great accompaniment underneath it. This song was written for the 2022 FIFA World Cup by Jung Kook, who is a member of BTS. Those of you who are in the know BTS as a K-pop boy group. And by Qatari singer Fahad Al-Kubaisi. And it was performed for the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. And the words that the choir sang that were in Arabic simply meant better together. So thank you, choir, for bringing us that wonderful, wonderful, upbeat, joyful way to begin our morning. So we pause now for a moment. Before our service continues, we pause for a moment of quiet, a moment of acceptance of who we are, acceptance and acknowledgement of what we're feeling, and a moment of remembering, reminding, re-feeling that connection we have with the people in this room, with the people and the animals and the plants and the universe around us, and the love and the life that flows through all of it. We remember we are not alone. And so we pause in the deep comfort of that connection and that love. May all beings know peace. May all beings know an end to suffering. May all beings know love. Will you join me, friends, as we sing Spirit of Life, Fuente de Amor. I have to share with you that as you were singing that today, thank you, reminded me that the first time I heard that song was 31 years ago now, when I joined a tiny little UU congregation in Victoria, British Columbia. I remember the look on the faces of the people there as we sang it together, and I'm welcomed and warmed and delighted and healed by hearing you and seeing that in your faces as well. I'm glad we sing that together. If you've been paying attention, there's no test yet. If you've been paying attention, you'll have seen the slides that often play before our service while we're gathering here and greeting each other, and while Joel and our other piano players are greeting us with beautiful music. Sometimes those slides, which were all created by the fabulous Jack Fitzsimmons, thank you, Jack, have showed our 8U. The slides today are especially wonderful. Showed our 8 UU principles, and sometimes, like today, I think, they have shown what we call the sources of our living tradition, the sources of our Unitarian Universalist heritage and tradition, the sources of our personal journeys. These sources are listed in the same part of the UUA bylaws as the current principles are, and this is a way we have of formally acknowledging and reminding ourselves that what brings us together in this room is not encapsulated in a single creed that we all adhere to or one book, that we draw our understandings of the cosmos and our place in it and how to be together from many different sources. And those listed 6 sources do a pretty good job of creating a space for most of us. And if you're interested, when the sermon is over, of course, you can see on the back of the order of service, our living tradition has many sources. We haven't really talked about it much, but those sources are up for revision right now, along with our statements of values and principles. The proposal, this is for our larger Unitarian Universalist Association, the proposal rewords them in a statement of inspirations that at the moment sounds something like this. Direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular and scientific understandings that help us make meaning and live into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. I think the intent with these newer words is to be broader and more inclusive, to open the door for exploration or inspiration outside of a specific list. As we talk about this new language over the coming months, we'll be talking about this as well. Now, both the current sources and the proposed inspirations invite us to draw upon a wide range of religious traditions and to pay attention to our own religious ancestries. So today I'd like to focus on the works and words of a couple of thinkers and theologians, one from an ancient tradition which we don't often pay attention to here, and one from our own deep theological history as Unitarian Universalists. Because I think the world is calling us to find inspiration and challenge that will help us confront the realities of this day, of our political systems, our environment, and the aching of our hearts for the suffering of our fellow humans. It's where we are today, I think, as we encounter the voice of these two thinkers, separated by time and culture and faith. So today we're exploring the voices of the Sufi thinker known as Al-Ghazali and the Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams. And I'm going to quote quite extensively from both of them, and I'm not changing any of their language. So Al-Ghazali was writing in the 11th century, and James Luther Adams in the middle of the 20th. So their language may seem dated to us, especially gender-wise, but I acknowledge that, but also share their words with you. Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali was an Islamic Sufi thinker, mystic, theologian, and jurist. He had a lot of jobs. A brief biography. He was born in 1058 in Tus, in Persia, in what is now the northern part of Iran. He spent the early part of his professional career as what we may call a professor at the Nizamiya College in Baghdad. He taught there for several years until he was beset by a crisis of faith. And this crisis propelled him to quit his influential job and take on the life of a poor Sufi. He spent the remainder of that life thinking and writing and practicing what became known as a sober form of Sufism, in which the ego and worldliness are challenged and overcome. For Al-Ghazali, this Sufism was completely necessary for an authentic Islam, as he said, and that, as the scholar Tobias Meyer reports, the whole religion, according to Al-Ghazali, must be informed by the mystical impulse. Now, of course, Islam is, and always has been, as rich in theological controversy and argument as Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism have been. Al-Ghazali spent much ink arguing against what seemed to him to be an overly philosophical Neoplatonist, very philosophical in the head trend in Islamic thinking. This was most clearly outlined in his work, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, in which he directly took on a group of Islamic philosophers who relied too heavily, he thought, on the thinking and the works of the Greek philosophers Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, non-believers all. We have this conception that in the world before books, or the world before the printing press, that people didn't read each other's work. It's a lie. The world was interconnected long, long ago. His largest and most overarching work, though, was the revival of religious sciences. Here, Al-Ghazali presents an encyclopedic treatise on a staggering breadth of issues of Muslim life, thought, and religious practices, from theology and law and jurisprudence to table manners and greed and sexual passion. The work I want to focus on a little bit this morning is a brief later work that is felt by some to summarize the gist of his thinking. The title most used in English is Letter to a Disciple. In Arabic, Ayuda ul-Walad, roughly meaning, O son. Like Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet, or Christopher Hitchens' Letter to a Young Contrarian, the Letter to a Disciple is a short text full of advice and admonition to a younger follower. And knowing of Al-Ghazali's crisis of faith in his youth, some scholars feel like he may have had his own younger self in mind as he wrote. O disciple, he writes, advice is easy. What is difficult is accepting it, for it is bitter in taste to those who pursue vain pleasure. Al-Ghazali discusses the prayer life of the believer, reliance on the teachings of the prophet, and the ways one should choose a religious master. But at the core of the book, and running through all of the other advice, is this admonition, O disciple, knowledge without action is madness, and action without knowledge is void. Knowledge without action is madness, and action without knowledge is void. For Al-Ghazali, as for those he critiqued, knowledge and learning were important, vital in fact. But for Al-Ghazali, knowledge without action was worse than useless. It was dangerously ego-centered. The passage on advice I shared a moment ago continues like this. The student of conventional knowledge is occupied with gratifying his ego with worldly exploits, for he supposes that his knowledge alone will be his salvation and his deliverance is in it, and that he can do without deeds. And this is the conviction of the philosophers. Glory be to God Almighty, this conceited fool does not know that when he acquires knowledge, if he does not act on the strength of it, the evidence against him will become decisive. Not mincing words. Kind of makes me think about salvation by reading list, but anyway. That's a critique of myself, not anybody else. Just as Christians were and have been caught up in a debate about whether salvation comes by work or by grace or by faith, for Al-Ghazali, faith itself includes action. When asked about the traditional 5 pillars of the Islamic faith, testimony that there is no God but God and Muhammad is his prophet, formal prayer 5 times a day, giving alms, fasting at Ramadan, and the pilgrimage to Mecca for all who are capable of it, he responds with a description of the faith that these traditions imply. Faith is a verbal declaration, consented by the heart, and action in accordance with the 5 pillars. And the evidence of deeds is incalculable. Indeed, God may be merciful and forgiving for Al-Ghazali, but our actions in this life will unavoidably be taken into account on the day of reckoning. Remember his words, O disciple, knowledge without action is madness, and action without knowledge is void. And a second voice this morning, James Luther Adams. All social action is therefore explicitly or implicitly grounded in a theology. And all theology implies a fundamental conception of social action. James Luther Adams is considered to be the preeminent 20th century Unitarian and then Unitarian Universalist theologian, and one of the most esteemed theologians of liberal Christianity in the 20th century. Born into a fundamentalist family in eastern Washington state in 1901, Adams grew to reject the faith and attitude of his family and embrace a much more radically liberal mindset and theology. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on his biography this morning, but briefly, he studied at Harvard Divinity School, a very Unitarian place at the time, and became a Unitarian minister in 1927. Soon he was hired to teach at Meadville Lombard Theological School and at the University of Chicago. And in 1957, he moved to Harvard and then to Andover Newton Theological School. Throughout his career, he remained actively involved in Unitarian and then Unitarian Universalist congregations and social causes until his death in 1994. He was a prolific writer and thinker, exploring a wide range of ideas and topics and helping, through his work with the Unitarian Universalist Association's Commission on Appraisal, helping to shape the way Unitarian Universalists think and organize ourselves to this day. I want to focus today on two central aspects of his thought: his defense and critique of early 20th century liberalism, and his championing of what he called voluntary associations, which I have mentioned from the pulpit before. Several of his papers and lectures focus on arguing with critics and opponents of liberalism and liberal theology. But he spends almost as much time, I think, arguing with and critiquing what he saw as neglectful, dangerously incomplete liberalism in his colleagues and his co-religionists that neglected or refused to take seriously the darker part of human nature, or the shadow side of modernism. For Adams, this weakness manifested itself as, he said, accommodation to the ways of the world, and a neglect of deeper levels both of human consciousness and of reality itself. He wrote, and again, this is his language, instead of confronting men with the demand of inner commitment to the ideals of prophetic religion, liberal religion more and more provided a cosmic or religious sanction for the interests of a particular group. In the end, the attitude of distance won the day, and liberalism achieved poise by living at the lovely temperature of detached, middle-class common sense. Not mincing words either. Recognizing that humans had a deep-seated and universal tendency to become ego-centered and ignore mutual needs in service of the drive, the theater, the cave, and the marketplace. What do you think he was writing today? Adams called for a new liberalism. It wasn't merely an intellectual exercise for him. He spent the year before going to teach at Meadville Lombard, he spent that year in Germany in the mid to late 1930s. A Germany beginning to fall under the sway of Hitler and the totalitarianism of his Nazi ideals. Adams documented the resistance and the non-resistance of various churches and leaders to Hitler's growing influence. He himself was detained and questioned by the Gestapo and was lucky to escape without imprisonment. This experience, which he referred to as a conversion experience in his autobiography, forever enlivened Adams' critique of his own liberal tradition. He described this reborn liberalism in many ways over the years. In an essay called The Liberalism That Is Dead, a stinging critique of the dangerous liberalism I mentioned earlier, he outlined 4 features of his new liberalism. One, that revelation is continuous. It's not sealed in one book or one place or one time. That all relations between human beings must rely on consent and not coercion. That we have a moral obligation to work toward democratic community, and that we are still justified to have optimism. This was his liberalism. It's those 2 points in the middle. The relations must be voluntary, and that our liberal convictions must lead us to work for a better world. And his experiences during the birth of Hitler's Germany that show us the way to Adams' discussion of voluntary associations. Now, these are organizations like this congregation and other service organizations, social welfare organizations, in which and through which the work of democracy is done. Adams wrote that it is only through the exercise of freedom of association can consent of the governed become effective. In fact, it's the abandoning or suppression of these kind of associations which come together to affect public policy that signals the beginning of totalitarianism for him. So how does this lead us to thought and action and Al-Ghazali? Well, as I said earlier, Adams believes that we are morally obligated by our commitment to our liberal values and religion, morally obligated to work toward improving the world through democratic action. Through his theological explanations of power, Adams came to assert that all social action is explicitly or implicitly grounded in a theology. And all theology implies a fundamental conception of social action. Involuntary associations? Well, think back to Adams' words, which Julia shared earlier in our service. The voluntary association at its best offers an institutional framework within which the give and take of discussion may be promoted, an institutional framework within which a consensus might be brought under criticism, to be subjected to change. It offers a means for bringing a variety of perspectives into interplay. The voluntary association, he thought, is the best place in which we can work out in community the deeper convictions of our hearts and intellects, and in which and through which we can effect change in the world. Now, the thinking of neither of these men is totally encompassed or exhausted by what I've shared with you today. Both were prolific. Both spent most of their adult lives teaching and acting. Both were actively engaged in critique of the prevailing thinking of both of those outside their traditions and their co-religionists. And from different worlds, I imagine they might vehemently disagree with each other over what our deepest convictions should be, and certainly over the source of those convictions and where they ultimately lead us. But they both point us to the truth that our actions grow out of our deepest convictions, and whether we want them to or not, ultimately reveal to us and the world what those deepest convictions are. For Al-Ghazali, our thinking and actions are grounded in the love of a God revealed to the world in the words and life of the prophet. For Adams, I think our thinking and actions must be grappled with in voluntary associations, communities that challenge us to understand our deepest convictions and that allow the actions that grow out of those convictions to have an impact on the world we inhabit together. I want to finish this morning. Normally, I like to finish my sermons with my own words, but I want to finish this morning by sharing some of James Luther Adams' most well-known words. I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, a new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, on an adventure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity in diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new. May we hear the words of these people, my friends. May we remember why we are together, and the power that we have to transform our own lives, each other's lives, and the world around us when we live into our convictions together. May it be so. Adams talked about the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new, and so we're going to sing a little bit about that Spirit now. I invite you, please, to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together, You got to do when the Spirit says do. The words are on the screen.
Right on. We have just two announcements today for congregational news, both from the Social Justice Committee. Who do you want to nominate for Share the Plate? Nominations will be open March 29th through April 12th, with voting happening soon after. Start planning now so you can nominate as many of your favorite local nonprofits as you wish. The top 8 organizations will be our Share the Plate recipients for October 23rd through October 2023, 24, through June 2025. I got it, okay. And will be unveiled at the end of the annual meeting. If you have questions, contact Denise Jansen-Eager. Also, on Thursday, March 28th, join your UUCOD friends at Galilee Center and distribute Easter food boxes to those in need in the East Valley. Sign up in the lobby on the circle table or look in last Friday's newsletter for more details. Now, if you will please join me as Reverend Ian extinguishes the chalice. We extinguish this flame but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, there is too much hardship in this world not to find joy every day. There is too much injustice in the world not to find the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world not to heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with grace of divine love every day. Go in peace, my friends, to love and serve the world.
Oh, yeah, there's more to it.